Hey everybody, welcome to the garden. So it's been a really wet couple of weeks. Probably had the rainiest 2 weeks that we've had in the garden probably ever since I've been here. It has been a lot of rain coming down, so we're in between rainstorms right now. I want to show you what our garden looks like right now. It's the beginning of the year, it's early January. We've just gone through some storms. Did our garden hold up? Let's take a look. Hope you're all doing well. As you can see, there is an abundance of water out here. Like I mentioned, it's been raining like crazy. You can actually see our compost pile is still soaked. So if you live in normally it's pretty dry in this environment. So one thing I'd recommend is flatten out your top a little bit, or kind of so it doesn't come to a point, and then actually even turn it into like a little basin up there if you can. This one got flat, it's getting smushed a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is kind of make a little pit at the top, almost like a cinder cone volcano. Because what it is, you'll notice it's been soaking, raining down, but check this out. If you dig just down into my pile a little bit, in a couple spots, it's still relatively dry, and it has been raining like constantly. Now, granted, most other material is wet, but some of the stuff on the edges, on the sides, it's pretty like almost vertical. So the water just sheds right off. So that's why it's important to try to capture as much of that rainwater as you can by creating a little pit at the top. Now let's set our sights onto the plants out here. You can see, like I mentioned, it's been raining a lot. Look at the field right next to us is just inundated with water. This is a great time of the year to kind of reassess your drainage situation. If it's in an ornamental landscape or edible landscape, drainage is important. You don't want to have sitting water for too long. Even in the winter, it's not great. Now, some plants can tolerate it, no problem, but it's just something to consider. Now, you can see here, we have these raised hills. We've cultivated a lot. And even though you can see areas where we have tons of water, look, our blueberries are just inundated. Now, not great, but it'll evaporate off. It literally just stopped raining just a little bit ago. So they'll dry out a bit, they'll be okay. But you can see over here, just a few feet away, where we've had these raised hills, we've cultivated the soil. It's more well draining, a lot of organic matter to help absorb that and retain some of that moisture. But these are all doing well. So you'll notice there's no big amounts of standing water around them. So all of them are happy and healthy and looking pretty good. Thankfully, there hasn't been too much destruction. I did notice some of our broccoli was looking pretty good, but they're almost, check them out, almost time to harvest. Look at that broccoli, and look, our cabbage right here too as well. Pretty impressive. It's doing great. Now, if I wait, this broccoli is either gonna rot from too much moisture sitting on top of it. Luckily, we got a little breeze right now to kind of dry them off. I did notice one little piece over here I'll show you where I was like, darn it. I looked at it and it had a little bit of rot where the water was just resting. But other than that, they're looking really, really healthy. Now, if you wait to harvest them, you will be upset because the broccoli head will loosen, it'll start to blossom, and then it won't be as delicious anymore. It'll start to flower, and that's not ideal. So right now for us, it's gonna be a time for us to get in here and start harvesting some of these heads of broccoli, whether we want to or not, because it is just that time. Like I said, you see the water is just everywhere. So I'm hoping that we can still have good plant growth, even with all this excess water. Of course, I haven't been using the irrigation system. The storms are coming. It's good. That's why if you're gardening, it's good to keep an eye on the weather report and just kind of keep it in mind. It's never super accurate, but it's usually somewhat close. But check this out. I came back. I've been gone also. So it's been raining for the last 2 weeks, but I've also been gone from this garden for 2 weeks. So this garden has gone unmaintained for 2 weeks during the wettest 2 weeks we've ever had. So it's kind of nice to come back to see some plants. So we did do some harvesting right before we left for Christmas break, but you can see all this cauliflower is looking really good. Look at the garden, it's just kicking it. And right now, a lot of our citrus are ready to harvest. So we're looking forward to that as well. For me, I won't be doing a whole lot of work out in this garden because other than harvesting and cleanup, because it's just important. You don't want to be cultivating the soil when it's this wet. Here you can see here's a cauliflower. Look at that, boom, look at those beauties. Little purple one, the graffiti, gorgeous. But here's one right here. This is what happens if you don't get to it and harvest it in time. Now, still edible. You can see it's starting to loosen a little bit. So I just now noticed this one this morning, so it'll be time to harvest this one. You can see some browning on top, not ideal. That doesn't mean it's wasted. It just means we've got to get this harvested. I'll clip some of that out and we'll just maintain the rest. That is good to eat. And here, I'll pop some off and eat it. Delicious, actually. It is so good. It's actually kind of sweet in a way. That is really good. I'm gonna get some kids hooked on broccoli and some cauliflower with this garden, but it's so good. So good time to harvest. I'm not really gonna worry about weeding right now, or like I said, cultivating, because the soil is so wet and so saturated that if you start digging around in it, you know, trying to take too much advantage of the break in the storm, you might end up doing more harm than good. So it's important just to keep your work light. Try not to step into your garden as much as you know, as too much, because you know, all that weight, you're compressing the soil, you're pushing air out of the soil. You don't want to do all that. So it's good to kind of wait a little bit on doing, you know, a heavy amount of work, especially if you're gonna be working near your garden. But a little light harvesting, some cleanup is okay for us. We've kind of been set our sights on that. We're also having to focus on our citrus. Our citrus trees are full of fruit right now. Look at the blood oranges on this tree. So they've survived the storm, but we are losing some to the storm where they drop. Doesn't mean we gotta waste them. So we're gonna have the kids come out. We'll harvest some that have fallen. If they're not rotting, they're going to be good to go. Some of the oranges here, you can see this one's been resting here for a while. Probably got nibbled on by a squirrel or something, and that will go into the compost or the green waste bin. You can see a lot of these limbs too are extremely heavy and weighed down with fruit. So we've been waiting to harvest, but it might be a good time to actually do a little bit of thinning. It doesn't mean we need to pull every last orange off the tree, but it would be nice to kind of lighten the load on some of these branches and thin them out just a little bit, so that way when these winds blow through, it doesn't put too much stress on these limbs. Boom! Can you see that sucker branch right there? Look at that. Now this is one thing. Whoop. Now that's a sucker, so that is going to be pruned away. We got to cut that away because it's not going to be good for this tree. So we'll cut that out. Any of these dead branches that we're starting to be exposed will go. You can see the tree has thinned itself out a lot. Not just fruit, but leaves have gotten blown out. So some new limbs that are, you know, exposed or dead, those ones are going to get clipped away. So it's important to do what harvesting you need, but also get in here and clip out some of that old material. You can see right here is a good example of just old dead branches that have no leaves on them, no leaves in sight, and cut it back to good healthy growth. And that'll help open this tree up a little bit and make some room for some new branches to develop. But really thinning the weight off of those limbs is going to be very helpful. You can see a great example of that right now, at least in need. Our lemon trees are doing good. They're nice and squat and stocky. We keep them pretty moderately sized. We don't let them get too big, but even still, there's so much fruit on there. So it's time for us right now to take advantage of this dry weather, do some harvesting, and lighten the load on those branches, because we don't want to come back to a fallen over tree or a tree that gets split down the trunk by, you know, all the weight of these fruit just hanging and, you know, weighing them down, pulling them apart. So it's important to try to do what you can for these fruit trees, so that way when that severe weather comes in, you kind of have it under control. Luckily for us, we came back, I said, 2 weeks away with 2 weeks of severe weather. And luckily, all the trees were fine. We really didn't have any loss. Was minimal. The damage was minimal. You see, I've used a lot of leaves to mulch everything, and it's actually worked out really nicely to kind of slow the weeds down a little bit. Also keep the soil in place. You know, we love dirt here and soil and building it up, and so you really want to protect your soil whenever you can. Gosh, look at that cilantro right now. Ooh, that's good. And the garlic. So we got some good stuff. The beets are on their way, the carrots, cabbage. So we're looking forward to a wonderful harvest this winter. But thankfully, the garden survived that storm. We're just going to swim our way out of this garden, do what work we can, do what cleanup we can. But like I said, we're going to avoid doing too much out here. We don't want to be pulling weeds when the soil's too wet, and we don't want to be cultivating when it's too wet, because it'll degrade the structure of your soil, the way the soil binds together. We don't want to damage that. We don't want to push out the air any more than it already is. But other than that, that's what we're up to today. Do a little light cleaning, get as much work as we can get done while we can. And then eventually we'll get back to finishing up some of the pruning on these trees, do one last pruning, and of course, in between these storms, we'll have to do our second dormant spraying on some of these fruit trees, but we'll get into that another day. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the garden. I hope it inspires you to garden where you're at, and cultivate where you're at, and do all that you can to grow as much food and healthy, delicious nutrition for yourselves as possible. Until next time, garden friends, happy gardening to you all. Please never stop growing, and go have yourself a happy harvest. You're only one seed away.